Here's a guy who thinks there's scientific evidence that a god exists.
We now know the universe began in a sort of Big Bang, expanding in every direction we can see. We understand the structure of matter, why it behaves the way it does, and the laws that govern it all. Closer to home, we understand life itself, they say. It simply evolved from non-living matter with chance combinations of chemicals enduring over time as they were somehow more fit for survival and duplication. Until billions of years later, you have a world of whales, giraffes, bald eagles, and yes, even television hosts.
But you're going to try to convince us that magic somehow makes more sense than that, right?
Yet when you look more closely, those claims fall apart. Because in every aspect of the world, if you're willing to seek out and to accept the evidence, you see the fingerprints of a divine creator.
How do you see the fingerprints of an incoherent notion?
Ancient King David of Israel composed many of the Psalms of the Bible, and in them, he makes a simple and elegant point. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God.
Gee, I never thought of it that way. What an irrefutable argument.
Yet there are many scientists today who would call King David the fool. They stare into the cosmos above or examine the variety of life in the world and see no evidence of God anywhere at all. They look into nature and see nothing in it that points beyond nature. This sentiment was perhaps most famously expressed by biologist, evolutionist, and staunch atheist Richard Dawkins when he wrote, "The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect. If there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference." That is, the universe and all that is in it look exactly as we should expect them to if there is no God.
Even if there is a God, his existence is of no observable consequence, given that a God-created world is indistinguishable from a world we would expect to see if it were not created by a God.
So who's right, Mr. Dawkins or King David? Without a doubt, King David is correct. Too many physicists, cosmologists, and biologists refuse to see the evidence before their eyes.
Evidence of what? Given that apologists have an excuse ready for every aspect of reality that does not look designed, what would an undesigned universe look like to you? Maybe you would say that an undesigned universe would be totally chaotic. I don't see why that would be the case, but even if it were, that wouldn't falsify the existence of a God, because certainly a God could create a chaotic universe if he wanted to. Maybe you would say that there would be no universe at all, but that would also not falsify the existence of God, because there's no reason why a God could not elect to abstain from creating any universe. The idea that a God exists is not falsifiable in any empirical scientific way, so it is not a scientific idea. An idea is not properly scientific if there is no test that can be done or observation that could be made that would show it to be false if it hypothetically were false.
Refuse to acknowledge the fingerprints of God that exist all over the very subjects they study. They proclaim a dedication to following the evidence, but when the evidence points in a direction they find undesirable, they look away.
Evidence could not comprehensibly point in an incoherent and/or meaningless direction. If the conclusion you want scientists to draw is not falsifiable, the evidence cannot point to it. If it's incoherent, which is the case if you define God as existing independent of time and space, then evidence could not possibly point in its direction.
My friends, we don't have to repeat their mistakes. God's fingerprints are numerous throughout his creation. For instance, in Psalm 19, David wrote, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork." That is, David looked on the cosmos around us and saw God's fingerprints there. He recognized the truth revealed in the very first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
How does that logically follow, though? How does the mere existence of the cosmos denote the existence of an intelligent creator?
So without a telescope or spectral analysis or cosmic microwave measurements, David could still look at the universe above his head and conclude, this is a fingerprint of God who created all of this.
How, though? What is the syllogism that produces this conclusion?
And science has backed the Bible up, as the evidence does point to a universe that did not always exist. There really was a beginning to everything.
If by always you mean for infinite time, then that's actually debated among physicists. There are many that speculate that the universe, or maybe multiverse, could have preceded the Big Bang. However, even if time and space per se did not precede the Big Bang, the universe did still always exist in the sense that there was never a time when it didn't.
Today, the Big Bang theory is taken so much for granted that many do not realize that when evidence for it was first discovered, scientists vigorously opposed it because it sounded too much like the description of God's creation in the book of Genesis. For instance, when Georges Lemaitre first suggested that relativity implied that the universe began at a certain point in time, Albert Einstein told him that it suggests too much the theological idea of creation.
If this is true, you should explain it to all of the apologists who say that Einstein believed that God created the universe.
Writing in the esteemed science journal Nature, astrophysicist Sir Arthur Eddington said of the idea, "Philosophically, the notion of a beginning of the present order of nature is repugnant to me." And astronomer and cosmologist Fred Hoyle mocked the idea of a beginning to the universe, saying that the idea of a Big Bang was, quote, "a form of religious fundamentalism." In fact, he coined the term Big Bang to ridicule the idea, saying that the reason why scientists like the Big Bang is because they are overshadowed by the book of Genesis. Why they were all unnerved is perhaps best summed up in a statement by famous physicist Stephen Hawking. As New Scientist magazine reported in 2011, he noted, "A point of creation would be a place where science broke down. One would have to appeal to religion and the hand of God."
Because scientists all just want to sin, right? They're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness?
Well, many years have passed and the verdict is in. The scientists who rejected a beginning of the universe because it sounded too much like the Bible were wrong.
No, the verdict is not in. Whether the Big Bang was the beginning of the universe is still debated. But even if all of time and space did begin at the Big Bang, the idea of a creator God would still be incoherent. But even if all of time and space did begin at the Big Bang, the idea of a creator God would still be incoherent because you can't create something at a time when it already exists. And if the universe is all of time and space, there obviously could never be a time when time did not already exist, even if it doesn't extend infinitely into the past.
And a universe that came into existence at some point in time is now considered the reigning theory in cosmology. As prominent physicist Alexander Vilenkin wrote in 2007, "With the proof now in place, cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning."
That's Vilenkin's interpretation of the Borguth-Vilenkin theorem, but not even his fellow co-authors of the theorem share that interpretation.
Now, you might think that, there's a theorem by Alan Guth and Arvin Bourdais and Alex Vilenkin that says the universe had a beginning. I've explained to you why that's not true, but in case you don't trust me, I happen to have Alan Guth right here, one of the authors of the Bourdais-Guth-Vilenkin theorem. Alan, what do you say? He says, "I don't know whether the universe had a beginning. I suspect the universe didn't have a beginning. It's very likely eternal, but nobody knows."
Why would so many scientists consider that a problem? Well, think about it. If the universe had a beginning, then what caused that beginning?
If it was the beginning of time itself, then not only does it not need a cause, it can't have a cause. Since you can't cause something to exist at a time when it already exists, you can't cause time to exist, because even if time has not existed infinitely, there was still never a time when time did not already exist. If space-time began at the Big Bang, then it didn't come into existence at the Big Bang any more than a yardstick comes into existence at its first inch.
After all, science is very much the study of cause and effect. If the universe itself is the effect, then what was the cause?
The mere fact that the universe hasn't existed for infinite time, if that is actually a fact, would not mean that it is an effect or had a cause.
And when scientists talk about the universe, that means the entirety of the natural world, all matter, all energy, all space, and all time.
Those categories exhaust all of existence. By definition, nothing can exist independent of all of those things, because to say that something exists, to say that it occupies reality at all, is to say that it has location in space-time. To say that something can exist independent of space and time is to say that it can exist without existing anywhere ever. That is a contradiction.
So the cause of their beginning would have to be beyond matter, beyond energy, beyond space, and beyond time.
Which would mean that it cannot exist by definition.
That is, if all that is natural had a beginning, then it points to a cause that is supernatural.
Which, insofar as supernatural is defined as independent of space and time, is non-existent by definition.
That is, the beginning of the universe is one massive fingerprint that points to God. But we can go further. What makes science and the study of this vast universe possible? Not just the fact that the universe exists, but that it is a law-abiding and orderly universe.
It's not law-abiding because physical laws are not behests that nature abides. They are descriptions of what nature regularly does on its own. The scientific study of nature does not require the assumption that any of these laws exist. In fact, all of the laws so far discovered were inferred from the application of the scientific method. They were inferred a posteriori from the data, not presupposed a priori. Also, these laws were inferred to exist inductively, which means that we can't say with absolute apodictic certainty that any of them really exist. We can only say that they very probably exist. Science could discover that none of the regularities that we infer to be inviolable really are inviolable. We thought the law of conservation of parity was inviolable. When scientists discovered that it can be violated, they revised it. This could possibly happen with every law, and if it did, it would not make the scientific study of nature impossible, because science makes no presupposition that these laws exist in the first place. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.